The Elder Scrolls Arena was developed by Bethesda and would release in 1994. It was the company's first attempt at an original concept, as they mostly developed licensed games such as Home Alone for the NES and a couple Terminator games. Arena would also be the company's first RPG. However, that wasn't always the case. The game was originally just called Arena, and it wasn't going to be an RPG at all. Instead, the player and a team of fighters would travel around the world fighting other teams in various arenas until the player became the grand champion. At some point during the game's development, Bethesda decided to include side quests to add some variety to the gameplay. Although, shortly after doing so, they realized the side quests were a lot more fun than the tournaments, and so the gladiatorial gameplay was dropped and Arena became an open-world role-playing game focusing on quests and dungeons. This would cause a little bit of a problem, as all the promotional material for the game had already been printed with the name Arena. Even the cover gave the impression of a more standard fighting game instead of an RPG. And so, they would add the title The Elder Scrolls with Arena as a subtitle in an attempt to give it a more RPG-sounding name. When the game released in 1994, it didn't start out a big success, but gradually grew through word of mouth, and eventually would develop a sequel in 1996 with The Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall. The franchise would continue to grow and soon became one of the biggest franchises in the entire gaming industry. When Bethesda was developing Oblivion, they considered adding children to the game as a way to make things more realistic. But they were of course ultimately never added, because if you could kill children in the game, it probably wouldn't go over well with players and reviewers. And at the same time, if they added children but made them invincible, it would ruin the entire purpose of having the children, as it wouldn't be realistic. When development began on Skyrim, this discussion was brought up once again, and they would of course include children in the game and make them invincible. But it's believed this decision was made late into the game's development, as if you use console commands or mods that disables their invincibility, children actually have unique death noises. Skyrim, like many games, has cut content, one example being the Windhelm Pit. If you go into console commands and type COC Windhelm Pit entrance, you'll be brought to the Windhelm Pit. It's not entirely sure why it was cut, but dialogue in the area suggests this would be a way to escape prison in Windhelm, where you would battle other prisoners for a chance at your freedom. Skyrim may seem like a pretty big map, but it's actually not when comparing to other Elder Scrolls games. Skyrim is only 37.1 square kilometers, whereas the Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall is over 160,000 square kilometers, making Skyrim not even 0.03% the size of Daggerfall, meaning it would actually take real-time weeks to get from one side of the map to the other. And what's crazy is that it's not even the biggest one, as Arena's map is over 6 million square kilometers, as it's actually the entire area of Tamriel, meaning it would most likely take you several real-time months to cross the entire map. The reason all of this is possible is because Arena mostly uses something called procedural generation, which basically means the map is made from scratch every time you play. A PSP version of Oblivion was planned for release on April 2007, but was of course scrapped. According to the official PlayStation magazine, it lacked the free-roaming gameplay the series is known for. Skyrim has many details that get overlooked by the average player. For example, ants can be seen on some tree stumps. You can make water boil by shooting it with fire magic, and when you kill a dragon, its burning body can be seen on the world map. Though the werewolf transformation in Skyrim is quite iconic, it's not the only transformation in the franchise, as in The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, you could transform into a were-boar. When The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind was released on the computer, the game's performance was so slow that many reviews joked that the ideal system for playing Morrowind was a computer 2 years from now. In 2004, roughly 2 years after the game was released, many of the newest systems still had difficulty playing the game at an acceptable speed. In early 2011, Bethesda announced on their blog that anyone who delivers a child and names them Dovahkiin on the day of Skyrim's release 11/11/11, they and their family would receive free Bethesda games for life. Someone actually did this, and so on 11/11/11, Dovahkiin Tom Kellermare was born. And as promised, he and his parents have any and all Bethesda games completely for free. Something that I think is quite funny is that this child, as of making this video, would only be 14 years old, meaning they still technically would not be old enough to even play Skyrim. Each game takes place on a specific province on the continent of Tamriel, one exception being Arena, which explores the entire continent, the continent being one of several on the planet of Nirn. The other continents and islands are Akavar, Morda, Thras, Yukuda, Vendane, and Admaris, with Tamriel and Akavar being the largest. Nirn also has 2 moons, the larger one Masser and the smaller one Sukuda, which actually revolves around Masser and not Nirn itself.